Welcome to Neurodivergent Relationships with Dr. Kathy Marshak, the podcast where we explore the unique challenges and opportunities of life in neurodivergent relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Kathy Marshak, a psychologist, author, and your partner on this transformative journey. There's also an exciting opportunity following this episode. Afterwards, you can join me for a live and confidential podcast after-party discussion. It's your chance to connect with others who truly understand, share your insights, and learn from each other. If you're already part of one of my forums, such as Autism, Asperger's Syndrome, and Relationships, or my meetup group, check the calendar there for details. If you'd like to learn more about my support groups and the after-party discussions, you need to visit www.asd-ntrelationships.com. And I've posted the web link on the page for this podcast so you can refer back to it. So now let's dive in. The topic is how neurodivergent dynamics shape interactions with coworkers, friends, and neighbors, or what I call the neighborly compromise, navigating ASD logic in everyday life. Have you ever found yourself engaged with people on the autism spectrum outside your immediate family? Maybe you're starting to notice how these relationships pop up in the most unexpected places, at work, with friends, or even with your neighbors. Today, I want to share a story about my neighbor, David, a successful software engineer working for an international AI company. What unfolded in our interactions became a classic example, at least for me, of how neurodiverse logic meets neurotypical expectations. When I moved into my neighborhood, David and his wife, Vicky, were among the first to introduce themselves. They asked to visit me, and being new to the area, I was delighted. I invited them in, offered them a drink, and started chatting. But it quickly became clear they weren't there for small talk. David got straight to the point. He wanted me to top some of my trees in my yard that he believed were blocking his view. He even offered to contact a landscaper who could do the job for me. Now, Vicky was there too. She smiled politely but didn't say much. I wasn't sure if she thought David was handling things well or if she was so aspergated that she didn't dare speak up. Either way, I wanted to be neighborly, so I told them I'd be open to pruning the trees since they needed some care anyway. But as these things go, it didn't end there. David followed up with a message later saying he'd already contacted the landscaper who could meet us the following week. He even offered to come by to help explain what he wanted. I politely declined, saying it wasn't necessary, but David showed up anyway for the appointment for the estimate. When the landscaper arrived, I described the pruning I wanted, just trimming back broken branches to keep the trees healthy. But when the landscaper asked if I wanted the trees topped, I said, "Oh, heavens no, I don't want to harm the trees." David seemed genuinely surprised, but he didn't argue. I thanked him for his input and suggested he could head home, which he did. Now, you'd think that might be the end of it, but no, that wasn't the end. A few days later, David invited me to his deck. He wanted me to see the view from his home, certain I just didn't fully understand how my trees blocked his view. I agreed to visit on a sunny afternoon. And wow, the view was stunning. Their home sits on a hill above mine, offering a panoramic view of the Pacific Ocean. I complimented them on their gorgeous home and even took some pictures of the view. But when David pressed me again to top the trees, I politely declined, saying, "You already have a splendid view, as it is." David was flustered. As an autistic man, he fully believed that what he wanted should be my guide. But it didn't stop there. Later that day, David texted me again. I had left my sunglasses at their home and he wanted to return them. I said thank you, thinking it was a simple favor. But when he arrived at my door, he had yet another pitch. David proposed a compromise. He said, "I'll pay for half the cost of topping your trees." Now, I don't know about you, but that didn't sound like much of a compromise to me. I asked, "So am I to understand that you think it's a compromise to ask me to pay half for something I don't want? What's in it for me?" David looked offended and said, Are you accusing me of being manipulative?" I assured him I wasn't accusing him of anything, but firmly said, "David, we're done." He asked, "We're done then?" I said, "Yes, we're done." And that was that. It's been 2 years, and we haven't discussed the trees again. You know, what struck me most was David's use of the word compromise. For many neurodiverse individuals, language can be transactional. Using the right words feels like enough, even when the substance of the concept is missing. David genuinely believed he was compromising by offering to split the cost of something he wanted. To him, it was logical, but true compromise requires understanding both sides, not just advocating for your own desires. For neurotypical individuals, this can feel frustrating or even manipulative, but it's not. It's simply how the neurodiverse mind often works, focused on achieving their goal. So how do we as neurotypicals navigate these interactions? The key is setting firm but polite boundaries. Recognize the empathy dysfunction at play and avoid being drawn into transactional logic that doesn't serve you. In my discussion groups, everyone chuckled at this story because they'd experienced similar dynamics with their ASD loved ones. But how many of you have faced this with a coworker, a friend, or a neighbor? If this story resonates with you, I'd love for you to join the conversation at our podcast After Party. It's live, confidential discussion where we can share insights and learn from one another's experiences. Many listeners find these discussions not only rewarding, but also deeply healing. Can't join live? No problem. Recordings of the After Party are available for members. You can also post your questions and comments on our membership site where you'll find a supportive community ready to engage. Visit www.drkathylearningcenter.thinkific.com to join the After Party or check the calendar for more events. And if you're part of my forums or meetup groups, check there for updates. Thank you for listening to Neurodivergent Relationships with Dr. Kathy Marshak. I especially like this topic of compromise in neurodivergent relationships. Until next time, take care and keep building those bridges of understanding.